Right off the bat, this is probably going to be a 3-part video, but I think it's really important to give you some of this context and information before I start talking about the day of Cayson's actual birth, because there are so many things that I wish I knew a long time ago that took me 4 babies to realize. So let me start by saying that before I say that, let me start by saying that there are going to be some triggers in here, and people give trigger warnings these days. Let me tell you some of my story in the past. If you've read my book, I've been through some pretty hard things. And so if you have problems hearing stories about miscarriage or hard things or grief, this is your warning. You can bow out now. But I'm always all about sharing real life. And I know when I went through some of my greatest losses, I felt so alone. So I make it a point to try and share the hard stuff too. So with that being said, in April of 2021, Jay and I had a miscarriage. And this was not my first miscarriage. This was my 3rd miscarriage. We had, at that point, 3 healthy girls, but my very first pregnancy with my late husband, I told you this, I won't go into that, but loss. My first pregnancy was a miscarriage, and then I had our beautiful daughter, Austin, who's almost 9. Many years later, met and got remarried. I actually had met him prior, but in the second life, remarried to an incredible man named Jay. And our first pregnancy together was also a miscarriage. And then 9 months later, we got pregnant with Emery Rose, who is now 4 and just turned 4. And then we had Tatum 21 months after that. And she is now 2. And then we had this miscarriage, like I said, in April. Now, I'm sitting in our boys' room. So we had our 4th, who is a boy. We had 3 girls and then a boy, come Earth side. But in April, I had a miscarriage, and it was really difficult. And one of the things that made it so difficult is that when I first thought that I might be pregnant, which I normally get crazy signs. I'm one of those women that knows within a week or so that I'm pregnant before pee sticks will detect it, before most doctors would see you. I have different signs and symptoms. And after being through now 7 pregnancies, 3 miscarriages, 4 full term, I know when I'm pregnant. And so I had told Jay I was pregnant. I had called my OB/GYN, who I had worked with for the last 2 babies, and said, I'm pregnant. I would like to come in. I have a history of miscarriage. As you guys know, I want to get my blood levels checked. They actually told me, which they always do, you're actually going to have to wait until you prove it by peeing on a stick, basically, and until you get to 8 weeks. Basically because what doctors say is the chance of miscarriage is so great, 1 in 4, prior to that point, that there's really kind of no point in seeing you. So I knew that's what they were going to say. I made my appointment for the point where I would be 8 weeks pregnant, and started to wait. And sure enough, I started cramping and bleeding, and I knew that we were losing the baby. And I had thought that I had been past that point in my life, maybe that it was just a hiccup kind of with my very first pregnancy, and then with Nick, my late husband, and then my first pregnancy with Jay, which was a full 5 years after that. I kind of figured that maybe my body just kind of had to get used to it and be like, okay, now I know what pregnancy is again. Let's get started with the next baby. But after having 2 babies, Emery and Tatum, those 2 beautiful sisters in a row, I thought, I just didn't realize I would be at risk yet again. So that loss hit me pretty hard. And we decided, kind of right off the bat, we didn't know what God's plans were. I knew, loss is so nuanced for everyone and so hard for everyone, different for everyone. But for me, it has so many ties to so many things. And I wasn't sure kind of what the next step would be going forward, but I knew that no matter what, I had a hole in my heart. I knew that, or felt like I knew that God did want to bless us with another child. And even though 4 kids sounded totally crazy, and I never pictured myself being someone with 4 children, and literally looked at other people like they were nuts if they had even like 3 or more kids, I knew that there was someone in our future. And so lo and behold, it didn't take very long, just a couple of weeks, actually 2 weeks after I stopped bleeding from my miscarriage, that I felt, no, there was no proof of this yet, okay? But I felt like I was pregnant again. And so I called my OB again, feeling hopeful, but more frantic than anything, right? I felt a bit of a panic set in because I'm like, I was just pregnant, I miscarried, I was not pregnant for 2 weeks, and now I'm pregnant again. So, they tell you it's probably not good for your body. They tell you, that there's trauma, and I still hadn't obviously finished processing or grieving my loss. So I'm just kind of stressed out. But I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this baby, just like every other baby, was a blessing, that God had sent us another life and that there was a reason for this life. So I called my doctor, knowing that I would do anything I could to bring this baby earthside. And I told her, I just had a miscarriage. And it was early. Again, I have a pattern of this, right? I have these early miscarriages. Can I please come in now before I get a positive pee stick, before anything else happens? Can I get my blood tested to just see if there's something else going on? And I have to tell you guys that even when those words came out of my mouth, when I was talking to the nurse on the phone, I don't really know where it came from. And in hindsight, I truly think it was God, because I didn't know that there might be something wrong with my blood. I just knew that I had lost 3 out of 6 pregnancies so far, and I wanted to have more information. So I asked for blood tests. My OB said, no, you need to schedule for when you're 8 weeks along. I'm sorry. At this point, I was like 7 days pregnant, 7 days from conception. So they thought I was probably nuts. Anyway, so she says no, and I'm like, okay. So I wait like 4 days, and those 4 days I am praying constantly. I'm praying for God to help this baby to stick, and I have this overwhelming feel that I need to get to a doctor. I need to get to a doctor and get my blood tested. So my OB didn't have an appointment immediately. I don't know if they were pushing me off or what. I'm not going to name names, but wouldn't give me an appointment immediately. So I decided to go into a walk-in. So I go to, it ended up being a partner of my general practitioner. So like a partner, not my normal GP, but one of his, buddies. So anyway, I go in, it was actually a woman. I see her. They do draw my blood. So, she's listening to me talk. And as I'm telling her, I feel pregnant. I was pregnant, had a miscarriage. I wasn't pregnant for 2 weeks. I told her, I know I sound crazy, but I know I'm pregnant again. I know it. I didn't feel pregnant for 2 weeks. Now I feel pregnant. I have all my unique to me telltale symptoms. I know I'm pregnant again. Mind you, there had only been one opportunity for this. Okay, so anyway, she agrees to pull my HCG, which is the marker for basically that tells you whether or not you may be pregnant. So she pulls my blood, we get my labs done, and there, lo and behold, there is some HCG in my bloodstream. So I am pregnant. So I am ready to start sobbing because I can tell, I can tell myself like, no, you're not crazy. You really are pregnant again. And she puts her hand on my arm and says, honey, I'm so sorry. You're not pregnant. And I said, but I have HCG markers. And she said, yes, but this could be leftover from your last pregnancy. Because I hadn't gotten tested to make sure that my HCG had dropped all the way back down. But I had gotten a positive pregnancy test, like many positive pregnancy tests, and then negative pregnancy tests, like literally no sign, no line. So like in my urine, there was a sign of HCG that was there, went away, okay? And then I had it coming back, but not to a point where a urine test would pick it up, but where it was on my blood draw. So anyway, she says, you're not pregnant. I'm so sorry. You have been through so much, which, she was right about that part. But we should really think about getting you scheduled for a D&C. And for those of you that don't know, a D&C is basically a procedure that doctors do for women who are having miscarriages. In most cases, I would hope that most doctors will tell you that you can pass your baby naturally if your baby has passed away in the womb. And that has normally worked for me. Our bodies actually know what to do, but not always. Of course, there are different circumstances and reasons why someone might choose a D&C. Or a doctor might think that that's the best way. Anyway, this doctor told me we should schedule you for a D&C. To put into words how I felt, I'm getting chills even thinking about it right now, because I knew that there was a life inside me. She didn't want to schedule an ultrasound. I think she would have if I had pushed for it. But I was very nervous and scared that they were going to think that I was absolutely nuts, because here this doctor is telling me I don't have a baby inside me and we should suck out whatever's left of the last one. And I know in my heart, I know that there's a new life inside me and that life matters. And all my life, God has given me what I think is an incredible gift of discernment. And there are things that sometimes I feel like I know that maybe don't make sense to other people, that maybe don't have concrete things behind them. However, I believe that the Holy Spirit has really gifted me with this ability. So anyway, at risk of, because I know it sounds crazy, at risk of sounding crazy, I kind of nodded my head along with the doctor and declined the D&C. I said, no, thank you. I'd like to wait and see what happens. In her mind, probably thinking like, see if I bleed more, but in my mind thinking, I need to find another doctor stat, and left their office. And as soon as I got to my car, I, of course, began bawling, cried for a while there, and then called my husband and let him know what the doctor had said, and that there was no way that I was going to believe her because it wasn't true. I knew there might even be a chance that he thought I was crazy. He didn't, but I didn't care because I knew that there was a baby. So I made an appointment with a naturopath. I spent the rest of that afternoon searching for a more holistic doctor and someone who might look at the big picture, who might be willing to take some blood tests, more than just an HCG, more than just me knowing whether or not my body thinks it's pregnant right now. I just needed to know where my body was at baseline. It took me a couple weeks to get into her, and thank God, literally, my body was able to hold on to that little life. But I was quickly approaching the week where I always have my early miscarriages. And so I made this appointment with a naturopath. 2 days before the appointment, I finally got a positive pee stick. It took a long while, which this is how it is with all my babies. I take a while to turn the pee stick, to get the double lines that you pray for. So I finally got a positive pee stick. I knew that I was pregnant, but this doctor's office had agreed to see me no matter whether or not I had a positive HCG test or not. So I go in to see my naturopath, whom I love, by the way, still with her. And I tell her my whole story. I say, I am super early pregnant. Yet again, this is my 7th pregnancy. I normally lose the baby in about 5 to 10 days from right now. And not normally, 50% of the time I've lost the baby sometime in these next 10 days. And I'm trying to keep my stress levels low this whole time, right? I'm praying like crazy, asking God for peace, asking God to hold that baby in there, to help that baby to stick. And she immediately says, let's pull all your blood work. Let's see how everything looks right now, okay? We pull all the information, and sure enough, you guys, my thyroid was out of whack. I am hypothyroid, have a hypothyroidism. Okay, not a doctor. So anyway, the next day, she ends up prescribing me a low dose of levothyroxine. It's a thyroid medication, a thyroid hormone. And even though I pride myself on not being on prescriptions, and eventually I'll be trying to get myself off of this one as well, I start that medication. We slowly end up increasing the dose to make sure that it helps my levels actually even out, because what we know is that hypothyroidism can cause early miscarriage. And I don't know for sure what would have happened if I hadn't seen that doctor, or if I hadn't stuck to my guns that I needed my blood tested earlier than most people would ever test me, earlier than most doctors would ever test. But I think that God let me go through this challenge. I don't think he gave me this challenge. I think he let me go through this challenge so that I could share part of my story. Eventually, I'm going to get to some of the incredible experiences I had once Cayson was born, because that is what we named that little baby boy, who was born 7 pounds, 1 ounce at home, perfectly healthy, and is just the most gorgeous chunk you've ever seen. He is now 9 weeks old. Yeah, almost 10 weeks old. He is so cute. Anyway, if I could help one other woman, trust her motherly instinct or her God-given discernment. If I could help one other woman to take a pause if the doctor suggests one thing and your heart feels like it might be something else, to possibly trust that through all of your praying, God is actually giving you a little voice that has possibly more information than what someone else who is just looking maybe at the textbook numbers might have. So that's why I wanted to share that part of the story. I'm going to give you part 2, which I promise is much happier. There will be less trigger warnings, but wanted to share this just in case it helps somebody else.